right. Well, welcome again, everybody. Thanks for making some time today for joining us and participating in a new and quite exciting webinar. This month, the topic is applications where sun meets water. So we're really going to be talking about all potential solar applications in Africa that connect with water. And you will see, thanks to our distinguished speakers today, that this can take a lot of different shapes and forms, really interesting applications. And I would like to thank our speakers already for making some time today to share with us about the experience. And thank you once again for everybody who is also taking the time off from busy schedules to listen to today's presentations. Before we get started and before I start introducing our speakers, I would like to say a few words about AFSIA. I'm sure many of you are already familiar with AFSIA, so I don't want to tell you about the association itself, but I would like to bring your attention about two specific things. First of all, we have recently published our first annual solar outlook for 2021. It's available on the website for free downloads. Hopefully it's a useful resource for everybody who's listening today to drive their solar activities in Africa. We've tried to do a really condensed report, which is a country by country review of the solar status. This is only the first edition, so if you have any comments, if you have any suggestions on how to make it better, well, please get in touch and we will be more than happy to take these comments into account to make an even better edition next time. Second thing, well, I wanted to tell you a little bit about upcoming events and what to expect from AFSIA in the coming month. Despite COVID, we've been quite busy. We've embraced the wonderful world of webinars and online events, just like everybody here today. You can see we've done a lot of activities despite the different programs. And now we're in February 2021. As I said, we've launched our annual report just a few weeks ago. Today, we are doing the webinar on solar meets water. Today as well, we will start our first virtual e-conference with Africa Energy in Dabat. So I hope many of you will be able to participate and visit us virtually on our booth there. But in March, we also have an e-conference scheduled about green hydrogen and its applications and opportunity for Africa. In April, we have another e-conference scheduled on solar for African mining. In May, we will have a virtual trade mission on DRC. That one will be an event in French. And then finally, in June, we have scheduled a webinar on the implications of the African Community Free Trade Agreement and how it relates to our activities in the solar industry. Before we switch on to Franco for today's first presentation, I would like to thank our members, because without our members, AFSIA would not exist. So you see we have different categories of members: founding members, partner members, strategic members, and then also corporate members. And it's a particular joy today in the sense that we have 4 speakers which are all members of AFSIA, which gives you an idea of the range of activities, coverage of the different segments in the solar industry by our members. And I'm really pleased to welcome a team of distinguished speakers today. So enough for housekeeping items. You're all waiting for the presentations. So let's move to this part. As first presenter today, we are welcoming Franco Traverso, who is the founder and CTO of Ingenious Water. I've had a really hard time making this slide here, summarizing Franco's experience. Franco has really worked on many different aspects in the solar industry for let's call it several decades. I think the one common point in many of your endeavors, Franco, is that you've had a really strong focus on technology development and are an entrepreneur by nature. Then what I also like is that you started your career not in the solar industry, but really developed a special link with Africa through a different job. And maybe you can tell us about this throughout your presentation. But without further waiting, Franco, thank you very much. Welcome to today's webinar, and the word is yours.
Thank you, John. Thank you for hosting us in this nice, interesting webinar. So we talk today about the sun meets water. So how we can, how technology can provide drinkable and irrigation water and water, clean water for industrial purposes. If you can go to the next slide. So we know, all of us know that the water scarcity is one of the biggest problems in the world. And Africa is one of the continents that is much suffering from the drought and the scarcity of water. Although the water is available, as you can see from the lower slide, but it is available only in the vicinity of rivers, of lakes. But the vast majority of the territory is dry, is not having available water or clean water to people. Go next, please. Then here you see in a typical African country, this is Algeria, for instance, you can see that water is available, the red spot, where there are coastal desalinators harvesting seawater, which is very much saline, and spending a lot of energy to produce that water, to desalinate, and distributing that water in the vicinity of the desalinator, so a few kilometers. But that water is tremendously costly to bring, to be brought inside the inland, where the villages are, where people are really suffering for the drought. And that causes poverty, cause water stress to population, to any kind of activity, especially agriculture. And that leads to migration of people to big cities. That is another huge problem. On the slide on the right, you can see that the groundwater in Africa is present. So in many areas, but it is not on the surface. And therefore, it is extremely important to locate where the aquifers are and pump that water and treat that water in a sustainable, long durability way, so that people can enjoy clean water for many purposes and improve their lifestyle, improve their health, improve their economy. Okay, but there is a need of technology to do all these activities all together and be implemented and located in the mainland, where there is plenty of sun, okay, and plenty of water underground. Go next, please. Okay, here you can see a typical situation where the water is absent in the mainland, but by putting together technology, experience, competence, etc., you can say the answer to the does a solution exist? Yes, exists nowadays, and technology helps us to make the full process from the detecting of the groundwater aquifer to the distribution to the villages of that clean water. So it is the solution can be done thanks to the groundwater search, photovoltaic energy harvesting, okay, innovative reverse osmosis systems, water distribution to different villages, so that any village each village can have potable water and irrigation water and industrial water, okay, at an affordable cost, okay, in a sustainable way. Then also the system needed to have absolutely the remote management for the troubleshooting, for everything that is needed, okay. And the last but not least, the new market approach that is water as a service, because we know that those populations cannot afford to pay upfront the money for in front of a big investment. This is the way to get sustainable and affordable water for the next 30 plus years. Next, please. Here, just to show you, groundwater search is today available, and technology helps a lot in this scope. And the solution allow to detect the presence of existing underground aquifers, okay, that can be either brackish or sweet water. And that system allow to detect the exact position, GPS position of the aquifer, where we will have to make the borehole. One only borehole in the center of the aquifer, detecting the exact depth and also the volume of the aquifer. Because since on the ground we will make an investment, an important investment that has to last many years, we must know how big is the volume of the water we have underground in order to predict how many years we can harvest that water. Then also the existing of aquifer in the area, because in this way you can also have an extra reservoir for the future need, okay, or for incrementing the volume of water to be treated. And then we can also expect what the salinity will be of that water, depending on the hydrological study. This is done via a drone, okay, so that we can get a success rate of over 95% in detecting the aquifer. That is one of the most important steps in solving the problem. Go next, please. And here we see the energy, the lowest cost per kilowatt hour energy is nowadays the photovoltaic. The levelized cost of energy of PV system is in the matter of few cents per kilowatt hour. Then we have with the photovoltaic a proven longest durability over 30 years. I have done the first systems in the since 1981, and they are still alive. Low maintenance needed, okay, but we know that sunshine is limited energy, limited only to sunny hour, and having a daily, monthly, and seasonal variability, which is affecting the all the process. The energy should be stored, but the batteries are very expensive and are having a very short lifetime. Therefore, the battery must be not used, okay, if technology helps you in avoiding that. And then also the system is high capex, but it is having an extremely low OPEX. Here, from the lower picture, you see a day when it is cloudy, and you see how the irradiation moves, okay, increase or decrease. So the system, which is not grid connected, it has to be enough intelligent to follow that trend of the irradiation and therefore harvest all that energy. Let's go to the next. Here we see how the reverse osmosis, solar powered, can help to solve the problem when you have the underground water, brackish water. Let me say that most of the areas, inland areas, are experiencing brackish water, while a few years back it was sweet water. But the aquifers are now being polluted, okay, and by salt, and in the areas along the coast there is the so-called intrusion water that pollute the former sweet water, so that most of those areas now have a water that is brackish and therefore very poisoning the soil. So reverse osmosis like this has to be standalone, 100% solar powered, without any battery, with all the pumps, etc., to be working at a variable frequency so that to adapt to the solar irradiation, microprocessor controlled and remotely managed, not only monitored, but also managed, so that a technician from its laptop can modify the speed, can also make a troubleshooting, all these operations that are important for the complexity of these equipment. You can go next. Here you have a kind of a typical village, okay, in a semi-arid area where there are villages in a distance of a few kilometers from one from the other, okay, and they are experiencing very dry condition with scarcity of water, with all the local economy that cannot take off because of water scarcity. You can imagine how many activities are hit by this water scarcity. Let's see the same village, next please. The same village, once you detect you can detect the aquifer underground, they are on the blue dashed areas, and a single plant like the one in the center for pumping and desalinating and distributing the water can solve the problem in one shot, the problem of water for many of those villages. So it can provide sweet water for irrigation, potable, bottling water, whatever is needed to all the villages at distance of several kilometers. And once maybe in 15 years, that aquifer may have no more water, then we know already that there are other aquifers with the exact GPS position that can be harvested. So increasing further many years the possibility of having underground water available. And then such a water can be used, as you know, for irrigation, for drinking purposes. Here you see the problem of distribution being solved with a new technology, again, powered by solar and without batteries, okay, where the treated water in the central station can provide water at a certain pressure, but we also know that along the pipes, the pressure drops okay, continuously, and therefore there is a need of relaunching pumps that increase again the pressure in order to maintain a certain pressure over the path of distribution path. In that case, you can provide the water at a big distance or also on the mountains without any battery and without spending fuel or needing other type of energies. Next, please. Water as a service. This is the business model that we are following. Genius Water, the company that we have established, is focusing on this model, because it meets the needs of either investor, but also the users, the population. So we will provide the turnkey systems, and together with the investor, co-investor, we provide everyday clean water to CNI, okay, to rural, okay, for the sanitation, for hospital, whatever is needed, okay, at a very affordable cost, okay, to them, and at the same time at a reasonable return for the investor, and then they pay daily by the pay-as-you-go systems, so that everybody in the chain are happy and can have a long-term sustainable way of supplying water and using water. Next, please. Here we have a case. We have installed last December this system that is standalone. The problem was water scarcity, very poor quality water, okay, high cost, and soil contamination, because the salt is daily contaminating the soil. Therefore, an off-grid solar power desalination system providing 75 cubic meter a day, okay? Out of that, 58 are for agriculture, okay? And then the 17 cubic meter a day are for the community, potable, very high quality potable water. It has been installed in Cape Verde, Boa Vista, totaling having 400 square meter footprint, investment 330,000 euro, funded by Ingenious Water. And the source of water is boreal with the brackish water at 6,000 ppm. It is typical in many areas of Cape Verde, many areas also of Africa. It has been started the construction the 25th of November last year, and before Christmas it was totally installed and commissioned. Next slide, please. On the left hand side, you see the sustainable water for agriculture. Before there was the diesel powered with a lot of costs and issues. Okay, today the ingenious Traverso small system provided those 58 cubic meter a day at 0.91 euro per cubic meter, which is a very low price for the agriculture, so it is affordable. Okay. And on the right hand side you see the potable water, where the former cost of water to the population, to the community, was almost 15 euro per cubic meter, because it was transported by truck from a long distance, and today is in the is 2 euro per cubic meter. Okay, flat price for the next 30 years, with a saving that is huge. Next, please. Benefits for the farmers. There is a drastic increase in crop quality, and no more contamination of the soil. Land productivity and cultivated area is definitely much benefiting. Okay, and then for the community, a big saving, economical saving, and the secured access to safe drinking water. And for the environment, 1.5 thousand tons of CO2 emission avoided, zero diesel fuel consumption, and zero environmental impact. Next, please. Okay, thank you. I think that the solutions are there. Technology help us in solving the problems of water in many African countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Franco. And yeah, thanks for being so genuine about sharing some precise numbers. I know this always is of great interest for our listeners. Sharing about concrete projects and concrete figures, it always speaks volumes. And we will get a chance to discuss more in details and ask some questions at the end of this webinar. This gives me actually an opportunity to remind everybody, if you have some questions, please use the Q&A control button as opposed to the chat button. It makes it a lot easier for us to address all your questions and to not miss any. So if you want to say hi to everybody, use the chat. But if you want to ask a question and make sure we don't miss it, please submit it through the Q&A section. Moving on to the second part of our presentation today, I'm very happy to welcome Laura. Laura is the Director of Business Development, among others, at Aptech Africa out of Uganda. And Laura has been spending already 6 years, if I'm not mistaken, in Uganda, focusing on solar and irrigation EPC activities. Africa is really specialized in some of the most challenging locations in Africa, among others, Central African Republic, Eritrea, South Sudan, Sierra Leone. I'm sure there's new countries being added at the moment. And what I like about Laura is that she's combining also this passion for solar with other things in her life, mostly focusing on health and use, as I know she's very involved on that front as well. But today we will speak about solar and water. So please, Laura, I'm very happy to welcome you, and I let you present and tell us about Aptech's solutions.
Okay, thanks so much, John, and thanks for hosting today. I'm just going to start by introducing Aptech Africa. So Aptech is an EPC company for solar and water pumping projects. We're headquartered in Uganda, but we also have offices and operate in South Sudan, Central African Republic, Eastern DRC, Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Niger. We have the mission to bring electricity and water through renewable energy to countries all across Africa. We offer solar off-grid and hybrid solutions, energy storage technology.
We interrupt you, Kamar. Can you please put yourself on mute? Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, so some of our applications, we do hybrid solutions, energy storage, borehole drilling, water pumping, irrigation, amongst other applications. And we work with lots of agencies, UN agencies, NGOs. We are in the C&I sector. We work with a lot of international companies, individuals, and of course, farmers. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. Next slide, please. So I'm going to be introducing a solution that Aptech has come up with. It's called Pay and Pump. So we know that Uganda has been one of the countries that's been hard hit by climate change. Unpredictable rain patterns have resulted in the death of both crops and livestock. So Aptech recognized that small scale farmers need an access to solar water pumping as well as irrigation, a solution to help insulate them from this threat. So we've created Pay and Pump. Pay and Pump is a pay-as-you-go water pump solution where farmers only pay for water when they need it. So Aptech has this vision of farmers in Uganda benefiting from increased yield, therefore increased income and socioeconomic class as a result of the Pay and Pump solution. Next slide, please. So if we dive a little bit into the problem a little more, we can see that demand for Pay and Pump, it doesn't just come from changing rain patterns. It comes from the cost of running diesel generators to power electric pumps. Also, so we need a solar as a solution for this. Also, farmers have routinely reported to us that they're unable to afford a down payment that's usually required to access pay-as-you-go water pumping solutions. So there's also a need for an alternative business model. Next slide, please. So with this in mind, Aptech offers the Pay and Pump solution. So it's purely pay-as-you-go business model. This means that we have our team of engineers and technicians. They go into the field, they do the assessment, they create the design, they do the installation, and we do all of the maintenance for the system. Farmers just pay for water as needed on a liter basis. So this model completely eliminates the need for farmers to make the down payment. And also we can offer the solution in both a submersible and a surface pump option. This way we can work with farmers who have a variety of water sources. The pumping systems that we install, they produce around 2 meters cubed per hour. So it's usually enough to irrigate 1 to 2 acres of land. So most small scale farmers. The Pay and Pump surface solution, it also comes with a push cart that you can see here. This makes it mobile, so it can be shared between multiple farms and households and also for security purposes. Next slide, please. When we're talking about irrigation, the solution that we use for Pay and Pump is a sprinkler irrigation system. We do this because it's also mobile, meaning it can be used for multiple farmers. It can give farmers a maximum flexibility. Next slide, please. So the innovation of this solution really is found in the business model. So we have a remote monitoring device that makes it possible for farmers to pay for the water when they need it. They can also see what the flow rate is. And then we also provide full technical support for the system. So this is based on our experience and years of feedback from working in the solar water sector. So often people say that they have these systems and something goes wrong and they're not properly maintained. So we're providing that as a company, so farmers don't need to worry about maintaining the system themselves. Also, our systems do not include batteries. And we try to use the best quality products on the market, including panels and pumps, to ensure that we are able to deliver this service. Next slide, please. So another critical piece of the pay and pump solution is the role of agronomists. So in order for pay and pump to succeed, our farmers need to be succeeding. So increased crop yield, it's not just dependent on irrigation by itself. There's multiple factors. So this means that we need to be working with agriculture agents within communities to provide the support needed for farmers to be utilizing agriculture best practices. So we have a network of agronomists that we work with that can provide advice to the farmers on best crops, fertilizers, and irrigation techniques for their individual farm. And this is really a critical component for the success of this solution. Next slide, please. Okay, so pay and pump model, we're still in a stage where we're collecting data on the impact. However, we already know a lot about the impact of solar water pumps from an economic, social, and environmental stance. So solar water pumps, they save farmers time, they can increase household income as a result of yields anywhere from 50 to 120%. This comes from off-season harvest or third season harvest. It insulates clients from, or farmers from, fluctuating costs of diesel. It can be used for both livestock and farming and agriculture applications. Also, if you're displacing a diesel pump with a solar pump, you're significantly reducing carbon emissions and you're reducing the use of fossil fuels. Water pumping allows for easier access for women. So when we look at gender issues, women in Africa, traditionally, they have the burden of carrying water. So this is reducing that burden for a lot of women. And finally, irrigation can be used to successfully grow nutrient-dense foods such as fruits and vegetables. And the increased household income, they can be used for things like medical expenses, improved health and education. So it really has a positive socioeconomic impact. Next slide, please. So just to speak a minute about some of the challenges we've encountered along the way, many farmers still lack water sources. So this is something we don't offer a solution for necessarily unless we're drilling a borehole, but usually drilling a borehole is cost prohibitive for most of the farmers that we're working with. Another challenge is that if not properly trained, farmers sometimes misuse the pumps or the irrigation lines if they're using drip irrigation. We've noticed there's still an overall knowledge gap when it comes to water pumping and to irrigation. And then payment behaviors for water is not always consistent, it can fluctuate. Another challenge that we've come across is that in the market, especially here in Uganda, there are some poor quality water pumps that break easily. And then when this happens, these products get a reputation and it spoils the reputation of the solar industry. So that's something that we struggle with. In addition, there's still some market research lacking regarding solar water pumps for some of the African countries in which we operate. So these are just some of the challenges that we're still facing here within the industry. Next slide, please. And finally, I just want to take a minute to talk about some of our insights. So there's still a huge gap in awareness and knowledge with farmers on solar water pumping and irrigation. So this is kind of an area where maybe some development organizations and non-government organizations can step in to fill this gap because as a private company, it's quite costly to do this education. We've tried a lot of different models with sales agents, and we've come to realize that sales agents need to be people who are very knowledgeable and respected within the communities that they work. They need to be trusted, and they really have to have that agricultural knowledge. That's why we use agronomists as part of our business model. Another item is that there's a need for more demonstration gardens within communities. So really, seeing is believing for farmers. They need to see how these systems work. They want to witness the actual crop increase so that they can then buy into the system and be part of the model. So there's also a need to have additional support for farmers throughout the entire agricultural value chain. So where there's still gaps is we need smart solutions for farmers for determining the best crop choice, the best fertilizer, and the planting seasons. We need smart solutions for preserving food from farm to table. So an issue in Africa is a lot of produce is lost because of lack of food preservation methods. So we really need to look at addressing this as well. We also need smart solutions for linking farmers to off-takers in order for farmers to earn that higher income. So these are some of the aspects that we plan on developing with the pay and pump solution. We need to address these gaps as we continue to develop the model. Yeah, so that concludes my presentation. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Laura, and great to see that you are rolling out this solution across Africa. And I mean, what I'd like to already mention here is that I kind of see a trend which we have already been identifying in many applications and companies throughout Africa. Between what Franco presented and what you are presenting is this making the service affordable, making it a pay-as-you-go service, no longer going like selling the equipment or selling the installation, but making it more affordable for people through finance plans. I think this is definitely key for more people to embrace solar and roll out those solutions to many more places. So we will most probably have a chance to speak about this during the Q&A, but thank you very much for sharing about this interesting activity at Aptech. We will now switch to Michel and make like a big jump, really big jump to another application where solar and water kind of find an intersection. We are going to be talking about floating solar. Completely on the other side of the spectrum, the solar spectrum, but very hot topic, especially in Asia right now, but growingly so in Europe, Africa, in the US. And to discuss floating solar today, we are hosting and welcoming Michel Chatelin, who is partner at Eversheds-Sutherland. Michel has more than 25 years experience in legal roles, focused mostly on energy transition, renewable energy projects. Michel and his team have advised public but also private clients globally on solar projects, and he just has passion for floating solar and all the possibilities this unlocks. And so I'm very pleased to welcome you, Michel. And very eager to hear from you about the latest developments, about the potential for floating solar, and maybe also about some legal aspects and some challenges that we may need to overcome for water. Michel.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Great pleasure to be here. If you can go to the next slide and then the next slide, please.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about floating solar and its potential for Africa and for the rest of the world. Before I do that, let me just say 2 words about the firm I work for. Eversheds-Sutherland is a global law firm. We work all over the world, also in Africa. We have an African alliance where we cover most of the continent. Within the firm there, we have a large, I think I can say, market-leading group active in energy, particularly renewable energy. And within that group, I'm the global lead for floating solar. So I'm more than pleased to talk to you about floating solar in the next couple of minutes. On the picture here, you see a floating solar installation installed on a man-made reservoir somewhere in the Netherlands. That's the country where I come from. Which is a small country with a lack of land, so to say, scarcity of land and lots of water. So floating solar obviously is a big possibility for a country like that. So a floating solar installation that I talk about in the next couple of minutes is comparable to a ground-mounted installation, but then it's floating actually. Next slide, please. The first floating solar installation actually was built in Japan about 14 years ago in Aichi, and then the first commercial system was installed a year later in the US of A. And then the development was a bit slow, but it really took off, I think, more or less 5 years ago. And currently it's gaining momentum globally. and installed capacity is growing rapidly. And on the map, you can see the countries in the world that are already have floating solar plants installed. Next slide, please. So if you look at this graph, it pictured the floating solar growth until 2018, but the current estimates of installed capacity is already estimated to be around 3 gigawatts. So where you saw the first initial commercial plants mainly installed in Japan, Korea, and the US, it spread to China, which is, I think, at the moment, the largest player by a fair margin, but also countries like India, Vietnam, Taiwan, and Thailand are active. And also we see floating solar increasingly being developed in Europe. So because of this development, we see that the costs for floating solar, of course, are decreasing, and then the financing parties are getting more and more used to it, to this concept of floating solar, although there's lots of ground to be gained, I guess. But it's becoming easier and easier to finance floating solar projects. And the same goes for one of the issues that you face from a legal point of view, that is obtaining a permit. So the planning and zoning and the permits, environmental permits for installing a plant. You see that governments get more and more used to it once they've seen the project and they're being explained what the environmental impacts may be. Then permitting becomes easier as well. So to cut it short, the barriers that actually are withholding floating solar from rapid growth are getting less and less important, which is basically paving the way for developers to realize the full potential of floating solar. Next slide, please. So some studies have been done to look at the potential, and some of those studies, they say that there's about 400,000 square kilometers of man-made reservoirs in the world. And the potential for floating solar, even according to the most conservative estimates on a global basis, is more than 400 gigawatts. So to give you an idea how much that is about the same as the totally installed capacity for solar energy globally a couple of years ago. So on the table, you see that the man-made fresh water bodies are supporting the most conservative estimates. And the table takes into account the global irradiance data on significant water bodies. And it assumes that if you cover between 1% to 10% of the total surface area for floating solar, you reach this potential. Having said that, it's good to note that the estimates are based on a very low ratio of coverage of the relevant reservoirs. So in reality, many existing projects that are implemented on an industrial or irrigation reservoir cover much more significant portions of those reservoirs. And in that context, if you talk about man-made reservoirs, environmental studies that are available confirm that there's no expected impact or little impact on the aquatic life in those reservoirs. So if you look at the table, you can only see that whilst Africa has one of the lowest number of water bodies assessed, it does have the highest potential for annual energy generation per year of all continents. And if you consider that nearly none of those water bodies are used for floating solar at the moment, you can understand there's a huge potential available for the deployment of floating solar on the African continent. Next slide, please. So a very interesting potential, or great potential, I would say, worldwide, is the development of so-called grid-connected hybrid systems, where you combine hydropower and floating solar technologies. This is not yet used on a large scale, but operators are looking at it, and developers as well. A small system has been developed in Portugal, but there are many projects underway and being deployed at the moment. Well, funny, but not funny enough, the largest hybrid hydro solar system involves a ground-mounted solar system, actually. So, but it's possible to use the reservoir itself to unlock this incredible potential. According to a study of the World Bank, many hydropower reservoirs across the world are suitable for such a combination of technologies, with a few of the largest installations being capable of generating more than a gigawatt of power. And then you have to take into account that 2 of the largest dams or reservoirs are located in Africa. So if you consider that hydropower and solar capacity don't provide the same type of power production, solar typically has a lower capacity factor and generates variable power. And the table compares the service needed for a PV plant having the same peak capacity as the hydropower reservoir. One can easily conclude that those 2 technologies complement each other. Solar being strong in the dry season and hydro being strong in the wet season. And in addition, hydro can provide pumped storage, so to say, for excess solar. Next slide, please. So as shown on the previous slide, some of the world's largest dams and reservoirs are located in Africa. But also many other locations in Africa would be suitable for the deployment of hydropower connected floating solar plants. So I think it's important in this regard that many African countries are at the moment dependent on hydropower, especially in the east and the south of the continent. And in addition, there are many hydroelectric installations under development, which are, I think what I understand, it's expected to add another 15 gigawatts last year and this year. However, because of the frequent droughts, electricity generation via those hydroelectric plants has become less reliable in many places. So if you would deploy floating solar plants on those African hydropower reservoirs, that would provide solar electricity and it would help compensate hydropower production during the dry periods. So this would sustainably aid the growing demand for energy for the fast-growing African population. The Joint Research Center for Europe of the European Commission has also looked into the potential of floating solar installations in Africa. And they looked at water service data of the largest almost 150 hydropower reservoirs on the continent. So they looked at electricity production, evaporation savings, and the potential of extra hydroelectricity generated by these waters. The results of the study indicate that with a total coverage of less than 1% of those reservoirs, the installed power capacity of the existing hydropower plants can double, and the electricity output can grow by almost 60%, which would produce an additional 46 terawatts annually. Next slide, please. So the overview pictures on this slide shows 20 of the largest locations which would be suitable for hydropower connected floating solar systems, according to the study of the European Commission. In addition, the map shows a large number of other locations which are identified on the map that also have potential. So if you consider this, we can come to the conclusion that of all continents on the globe, Africa may have the largest unrealized potential for the deployment of floating solar. And on top of that, the large number of hydroelectric plants in Africa appear to be suitable for floating solar, and the synergies between those plants and floating solar installations could be an important solution for the low electricity access rate in Africa. So considering that floating solar has proved its potential already on a global scale, and that the financial and technical barriers for installing floating solar systems are lowering, it makes this technology increasingly accessible. So floating solar actually may become a game changer, but whether or not it becomes a game changer, it definitely will become the third pillar for the solar industry next to rooftop and ground-mounted systems. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michel. Some striking numbers there. I'm a numbers person, so I was truly enjoying this presentation. And I also think some very strong message to policymakers and decision makers across Africa about technology that could really prove very beneficial and relatively easy to grab because already proven and relatively mature already. Definitely for starts, thank you very much for this overview, and I'm sure we will have a chance to discuss this in the Q&A. Before we get to the Q&A, we have one last speaker today. Her name is Kamar. Kamar, welcome. You're representing InfraCo Africa today. You're based in Morocco. And while some of the listeners may be acquainted with InfraCo to be like a really infrastructure-focused company, it may sound a bit surprising to be talking about solar irrigation today. And so I'm very pleased to have you with us today, so you can explain us a little bit more about the reasons why this is an important investment opportunity for InfraCo, and tell us a little bit about that specific project that InfraCo is supporting in Senegal. Kamar, again, a warm welcome to you, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, John, and thank you for the invitation. Can you hear me well and see me fine? Okay, great, because I can see my preview. Thank you very much, John. Could you go to the next slide? Next slide, please. Yes. So this is just the content summary. I will just go to the next one and start by presenting InfraCo Africa and the pitch group. So InfraCo Africa is part of the private investment infrastructure investment group, development group, sorry. The arm specialized in early stage project development capital and expertise. We are part of the broader group that covers the whole value chain of infrastructure projects, be it in Africa or Asia and all emerging markets. So we have our sister company, InfraCo Asia, that covers the Asian side, and we are both co-developers and equity providers. We have also within the group Emerging Africa Infrastructure Fund, which is the senior debt lender of the group. We have also GuarantCo that mobilizes local currency solutions, credit solutions in the emerging markets. And finally, but not least, the technical assistant arms that are PGTA and DEFCO with the IFC. So the PIDGE is an innovative finance organization that is funded by several governments, starting from UK, Netherlands, Switzerland, Australia, Sweden, Germany, and also the IFC. Could you please go to the next slide? Next slide, yes. So our mandate is to alleviate poverty within the poorest and most fragile countries in the emerging markets through pioneering infrastructure to help economies grow. So we strongly believe that we only be able to develop countries while developing infrastructure projects and promoting private investment in those projects. I will maybe touch briefly on the additionality criteria. That is something very important to the group and to InfraCo Africa as well. We made it as a selection criteria of our project that we invest in and co-develop to at least have two criteria, one of them being to mobilize investment. So we need to be additional in terms of financing. We don't want to compete with the private sector, but on the contrary, we want to be catalyst and de-risk as much as possible these infrastructure projects to be attractive to the private sector. And by this, we are achieving and reaching several SDGs. And in InfraCo Africa, we focus especially on the poverty and access to energy SDGs. Next slide, please. Okay, so moving on the company presentation. we want, as I said, to reduce risk and also costs associated with the project development, and also implement best practices and ensure that the projects are meeting international standards, to attract, again, the private sector, as we are willing to exit at some point. As co-developers, we may stay even after financial close, during operation and maintenance and construction, of course. But our main objective is to exit to the private sector and to leave a viable business. So we in terms of geography for InfraCo Africa, we focus and prioritize least developed countries as per the definitions of OECD. So DAC 1, DAC 2, and also fragile or conflict affected states. In terms of sectors, we are very, flexible. Historically, we used to do a lot of energy and power, but we are trying to diversify and focusing on logistics, transportation, agribusiness, water, sewage and sanitation, social infrastructure as well, for instance, affordable housing and capital market development and special economic zone, for instance. Could you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So, the objective of this intervention is to present a project that is in the middle of the webinar subject. So, Bonergy is a company that is specialized in different solutions for productive use along the value chain of agricultural production. It can go from water and irrigation solutions, such as solar powered irrigation systems and drip irrigation systems as well, but also electrical and lighting within implementation of modular solar homes, public lighting, other lighting solutions for individual use, and finally solar end devices such as freezers, food dryers, refrigerators for agricultural purposes. And I would maybe finish this slide by saying that one of the key features of Bonergy, which is the sponsor of our Bonergy irrigation project, is that it positions itself as a high-end and quality provider of sustainable products based on solar. Bonergy promotes proximity to the end users with several sale points across the country, Senegal, and a maintenance service. It also has a very interesting feature, which is the fact that Bonergy provides financial solution schemes to farmers, especially smallholder ones and medium-sized farmers, because it is key to those end users to be able to afford solar. As you know, in Senegal and many other countries, one of the main challenges is access to energy. And diesel is not the optimal solution for several reasons, be it environmental, of course, but also economic, as it may affect a lot the revenues of these farmers. And so the main hurdle for solar irrigation solutions development in Senegal is the fact that they require an investment that is quite expensive and maybe unaffordable for several end users, and hence the credit solution that Bonergy is providing. So they just pay an upfront of 30%, and then they will pay installments after each crop season, which is very suitable to their business model as farmers. Finally, Bonergy is also very active within NGOs and local Senegalese government entities in order to have an ecosystem approach and be able to be present in the local market. Next slide, please. So to give you a bit of background on the project, as I previously said, access to water and to energy are key in Senegal. And those are two elements along with agribusiness sector that are very important to us in InfraCo, because it promotes a better life for those end users, and the impact can be huge. So we with Bonergy and InfraCo noticed that there is an opportunity in increasing the productivity of these farmers by using solar energy and solar pumping. So we started discussions on the project in 2019 and agreed to start by a pilot that was rolled out in 2020 with the objective to install 100 solar-powered irrigation systems in Senegal. So this was a very small pilot and a small ticket for InfraCo Africa, but the idea for us was to prove the model and then scale up considerably afterwards, which we call the phase 2. And we are at the moment starting and structuring the second phase of this project that should help and finance deploy additional 1,900 solar systems, irrigation systems, across the country. And this was done after an assessment was performed on the pilot phase by a third party that was deemed successful. Next slide, please. So maybe quickly on this one to give you the collaboration rationale for both for Bonergy and InfraCo Africa. So for Bonergy, the first objective was to secure financing to scale its activities, and especially irrigation ones, which are the focus of this collaboration. And also, of course, having an institutional investor such as InfraCo Africa and the Pitch Group on board to be able to boost this activity and implement best practices in HSES, gender and women empowerment areas, etc. And of course, ultimately de-risk the project and attract funds for the future rounds and in terms of equity and debt funding. And for InfraCo, of course, Senegal is one of the main focus countries. It's one of the least developed countries, and water is a programmatic sector. And the main, I would say, feature of this project is that it's a multi-sector project. It covers power, water, and of course agribusiness, all of interest to InfraCo Africa. And of course, the impact on the people and on the planet is expected to be very interesting, and also on the wider economy, as in Senegal. The solar pumping is just in its beginning. Next slide, please. So maybe to give you some of the key outcomes of the pilot. So a third-party assessment was done, and a customer survey was also undertaken. And the feedback, the general feedback, is very positive from the farmers and also the institutions and the distributors. So clearly, Bonergy is perceived as a high-end supplier, and which is more interesting is that customers say that there is a high value for the money they invested. So even if the equipments are quite expensive, this can be justified by a longer lifespan and a higher quality, and of course higher productivity. And this is maybe to mention that this first pilot did not include drip irrigation systems that will be subject to phase 2, and that we expect to have much higher productivity and economies, and in terms of water quantity by implementing such systems. So of course, savings on diesel costs were one of the main comments from the customers, and generally there is a positive image from the Bonergy team and employees in terms of safety, efficiency, reactivity, and after sales services. So all in all, we can say that from the first pilot, Bonergy has proven its ability to deliver and is working on a larger marketing strategy to scale this project. And one of the main takeaways is that the demand exists in Senegal, and of course one of the main focus of the project is that we aim to replace all the diesel pumps installed by solar ones. And so just by doing so, the market is already very interesting. We can estimate that to 70,000 diesel pump installed that needs to be replaced. And so, of course, this also showed that there is a demand for irrigation solutions. And this is what led to an agreement with Netafim, one of the leaders in the sector, to deploy such solutions within the phase 2. So one of the main features that I forgot maybe to mention is that Bonergy, with its pump supplier Lawrence, has developed a specific and bespoke pay-as-you-go system. And I will maybe not be so long about the pay-as-you-go system, as you may be very familiar with this. And thank you as well, Laura, for introducing this very well. So this is quite similar, and we have proved by this pilot that this can be very interesting in terms of payment collection and reducing the collection risk. And of course, also in terms of maintenance, proactive maintenance, and the relation with the customers. So next slide, please, John. Yeah, and finally on the impact, and we're still as well assessing this impact at the page level. Currently, we expect, of course, an impact on the people, be it end users or workers. So, of course, improving the revenues and lives of those workers, especially the smallholder ones and women group and cooperatives that are the main one of the main target clients for Bonergy and InfraCo, by creating as well jobs with expertise in the field of solar and drip irrigation. So one of the main also interesting elements is that the suppliers Netafim and Lawrence can provide training for these technicians and workers, and impact on the planet. I think I covered this already. So clearly reducing the use of fuel and to improve local and global environment, and preserving water resources by using drip irrigation systems, and the quality of water as well. As the less we use from the groundwater, the more we preserve the quality of water. On Bonergy, clearly this is the aim is to and the impact expected is to de-risk the project and exit a stable company with a viable business model that should attract the private investors, and implementing best practices. Finally, on the wider economy, the objective is to promote a sustainable irrigation methods and mobilize private investment to the solar irrigation area in Senegal and also in the region West Africa, where the project can be replicated. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kamar, for this very comprehensive presentation about your involvement with Bonergy in Senegal. And again, I mean, what you just explained just further stresses the importance of proper financing and offering solutions which are affordable to people. What I find particularly interesting is that, I mean, we are no longer doing solar just for the sake of doing something good for the planet. I mean, it's just good. It makes sense for investors, for customers, for developers, and that unlocks a lot of opportunities, I think. So thank you for providing your angle to solar irrigation today. We have questions, so I want to jump straight to it and remind our panelists to be short and concise in their answers so that we can address as many of them as possible. And I would like to start with Franco. First question to Franco, and this is a question from Mark, but which has come several times in the Q&A box. What is done with the salt and with the dirty water of the remote osmosis process? Can you tell us a little bit more about this, please?
Yes, the salt that is removed from the water represent say few percent of the total volume, okay? And if the system is in the area, in the coastal area, brine that is concentrated water can be delivered to sea without polluting because it is brackish water, so lower salinity than sea. If instead the system is in the mainland, therefore it is possible to make a pond where the water is the brine is evaporated, okay, and the remaining portion is salt that remain there, okay, can be used also for agriculture or other purposes or for conservation of food, okay, and that is a very minimal part that is a non-polluting element. There are also solutions to grow fish locally in order to make good use of that salty water, growing like tilapia, for instance. Okay, that is.
Okay, thank you, Franco. Next question. I'm going completely shotgun here. We have many questions, so I want to address as many as possible. A question for Laura and Kamar. So the solar pumps follow the sun pattern. But in many cases, farmers have been used to irrigate early in the morning and late in the afternoon, which doesn't necessarily match the sun pattern. Can you explain us a little bit if there is a solution for this, or if actually the pattern changes? How are your pumps actually treating that particular aspect?
Yeah, I guess I can kind of address that. So our systems don't have batteries, so that is an issue, that if you need to irrigate in a time when the sun is not strong enough to pump the pump, you need, an alternative to a battery, which would be a tank. So we do systems that have tanks as well, and so the water is stored, and if you need to irrigate in the morning or in the late evening, then that can be done.
Thank you, Laura. This is exactly what Bonergy solution proposes. We have tanks, reservoirs to store a quantity of water.
Very good, and using gravitational force to irrigate. That was a question from Reinhard. Thank you very much, Reinhard. Satish has a question for Michel. And Satish would like to know what is the largest floating PV project in the world at the moment, and how competitive is it? Like, is it just technology for the sake of technology, or are we already looking at something that competes directly with other potential sources of electricity?
Yes, well, the largest floating solar installation will come live this year, 2021, in China. I think it's almost 2 gigawatts, almost unbelievable. I saw also the questions, questions about, fair questions about the costs comparison, floating compared to ground-mounted systems. if you talk to developers, some of them tend to say it's a little bit, maybe a little bit more expensive, the floating structure, the floating solar parks, but some of them say it's at the same cost level. What you have to take into account is that floating structures are supposedly creating a better yield because you have the cooling effect of the water. Of course, the entities that are using these floating solar parks, they keep it confidential, but I think the first numbers indicate that the yields are better. So it's quite competitive already. There are some insecurities that you need to price in if you talk about bankability, and that's related to the fact that if you compare it to a ground-mounted system, a floating system is a bit different in the sense that you have a floating structure. And then under the water surface, you have anchoring and mooring devices. And the experience with that, and also the impact of wind and the lack of experience, makes it a bit more uncertain how things will play out in the future. But year by year, we get more experience. So I think from a cost level, it's quite competitive. And of course, depending on which location you choose, it will differ. And for instance, and the last point I want to make on this point, the installations that we see are all installed now on man-made basins and man-made reservoirs. People were asking about what do you see on the oceans. Obviously, the challenge for floating are the waves. If you have lower waves on lakes and on man-made reservoirs, the existing floating structures are able to deal with that. But higher waves, let's say more than 1 to 2 meters, are still a challenge, but there are floating structures being developed at the moment to solve it. So you can eventually have floating structure offshore on the sea with very large waves. But for the time being, I would say look for the easiest water surfaces to start with before you go to the sea.
Thank you very much, Michel, for this comprehensive answer, which I think also addressed the question of Eggy Nielsen. We're staying on this money, capex, and affordability topic. Brian has a question for Laura and Kamar. Could you please explain or depict what is the typical cost actually for per day or per acre for a farmer using your systems?
Yeah, sure. I guess I can go for that first. So really, if you're looking at the cost of, irrigating 1 or 2 acres, I mean, there's a lot of factors like what's the crop, what's the soil, what's the season, there's a lot of different factors. But what I can say about our model is when we do look at cost, you pay per liter and the price is less, like 30% less than what our clients would otherwise be paying to National Water. So that is part of how we set the price point. The other point is, people maybe already irrigating manually, like they fill a jerry can and go and do manual irrigation. So like where we place the price point is about half of what they would pay otherwise to be, buying water locally. So it's hard to say exactly per acre, but that's, to speak to the price point.
And for you, Kamar, is there a similar situation?
Yeah, indeed, because we have several type of clients. It can go from very smallholder farmers to medium size to also big farmers covering more than 5 hectare land surfaces. I don't know if Gabriel wants to step in. Gabriel is the CEO of Vonergy. But what I could say, as Laura indicated, it's more a case-by-case basis, and we know that we might be positioned as a high-end solution. But then when you compare to fuel, especially the part of fuel or energy cost is really huge. It can go to 50% of the revenues, and so clearly when you apply a financing scheme, it's more interesting for the farmers.
Yeah.
But if you want more detailed ranges, we can provide afterwards.
Yes, so what we will do for everybody who is listening is we will not have time to address every single question, and this is actually a good problem to have. But what we generally do with our webinars here at AFSIA is that I will share all the questions that have been submitted through the Q&A section, not through the chat, but through the Q&A section. I will share those with our panelists today, and then they will be able to get back to you, follow up, and hopefully launch some interesting conversations. And by the way, one of those potentially interesting conversations is from Anthony from the Stock Exchange, who was with us not so long ago in the previous webinar, who has something in mind specifically for Franco and Laura. So I will make sure to put you in touch, and always happy to contribute to potential interesting business between everybody in the solar industry. Franco, I would like to stay on this finance and affordability topic. You've already shared the kind of savings that you are able to generate, both for the irrigation and for the drinkable water. But somebody, I'm sorry, I forgot who this was, but somebody was asking, who is actually buying this water? Are you selling this water to the local municipalities, or are you selling it to individuals? How is your model?
Okay, we can sell the water to communities, to farmers like cooperatives, or also to communities like municipalities having the scarcity of potable water. In the case of Cape Verde, we are proposing mostly to private farmers, to cooperatives. Okay, and in case of potable, the buyer is the local utility company that is unable to bring potable water at a reasonable cost to that village. So we, by pumping and desalinating locally, we can solve the problem at much lower cost.
Thank you very much. And I want to stay with you, Franco, move maybe to a more technical section of the questions. Kala and some other listeners were asking about what exactly is the tech that is being used in your drones to identify the aquifers?
Good question. Is the electromagnetic technology, okay, patented system that use very low frequency electromagnetic waves to be injected into the ground, like a sonar that is used for submersible. And then by sending these waves, the return is wave again, but delayed in phase and in time, so that the computer analyze this effect of the waves and detect, provide an image, underground image, like a radiography, that shows you where are the aquifers, the rocks, and the other materials.
Thank you, Franco. Still a little bit on the technical side, and again, question jointly for Kamar and for Laura. We have a question from Jean-Claude here out of Rwanda. As you may know, Rwanda is known for its many hills, and Jean-Claude's question is, could this potentially be a challenge or a blocking aspect, the fact that we have high levels of altitude, the fact that the water pumping may be happening at a different level than where it's actually being required? Is this a technical limitation for your systems, or can this actually be solved relatively simply?
Yeah, I guess I'll answer that first. That's a really great question. And so like pay and pump at the point that it is now, it's not a solution for everyone, for everything. And the head of the pump is definitely a limitation, especially like if you're looking at a surface pump. But we also have submersible applications, and depending on, you know, the head of wherever the location is with the hills, we can use submersible pumps that can pump, you know, 70, 80 meters up, and it might work. So it really just depends on location, but in the size of the pump, I mean, in theory, you can do it. You would just need larger pumps. that we don't have with our pay and pump systems right now. So it's possible to do it, but with the size of our systems, maybe not depending on the height.
Kamar, is there anything else on your side from a technical point of view, or are we along the lines from Laura just explained? Maybe Kamar is on mute, but it's okay. We will get back to this.
Sorry, I think I had some issues.
Oh, there you go. And now your camera is working. So
yeah, I thought it was working from the
welcome.
beginning. Sorry for that. Okay, could you please repeat the question, because I had to go and reconnect then.
Yeah, no, Jean-Claude here from Rwanda was asking about technical challenges related to altitude and maybe difference in elevation between the place where the water is being pumped and the place where it's actually being required. Is there any technical challenge there?
I suppose it might be a matter of power of the pump, and it's really during the sizing that this should be addressed. But I would say I don't have exactly this the clear view. Maybe Gabriel could he's addressing this right now. Bigger pumps, but yeah, she same thing as Laura. So with bigger pumps, it could be possible. Yeah, so it's just a matter of sizing.
Very good news. Thank you very much. And then we're getting to the last questions here. Michel, I'm going to take the question of Amin. I must say I do not fully clearly understand it, but hopefully you will. So I'm reading the question out. Could the floating PV technology be used on irrigation and water supply dams? And if yes, how would the panels damage risk be managed during the high water periods where the dam spillways are functioning for long hours every day?
That's quite a technical question, I would say. It's very location specific. Let me say that. I know that there are, you know, in agriculture environments, they have smaller floating systems that you can install in water basins. Of course, if you have smaller water services, it's important to know what's the uses of that service. If there kind of water life underneath that needs to be looked at. If you try to make a decision how much water service you're going to cover with floating solar. So it's very location specific. I think the question was irrigation systems and dikes. I mean, if there, I can imagine that there are no precedents with that, so people would have to find out. But generally speaking, you have easy water services. You also have shallow waters, so to say, where you can have floating systems installed. And the water level, let me just make that point. If you, for instance, look at a hydropower lake, there the water level can actually increase and decrease significantly. Mm-hmm. So one concern people have is that possible to fix the floating system? But there are mooring and anchoring systems available already for many decades that enable those kind of installations to be installed even on those kinds of water services. So the question is, it's very, I mean, the question was very technical. We have to look at a specific site. I think technical consultants will have to look at it to see whether it's possible.
Fair enough. Thank you very much. And then I would like to ask one last question, and this is a question to Kamar, to Franco, and to Laura at the same time, because it came up several times, and I will just mention Christopher, who asked this question. Is there any risk of depleting the aquifers with your systems? And if there is, like, how is this being managed?
I may want to maybe start on this one. Actually, for the phase 2, one of the main interesting elements of the Bonergy offer is that it includes drip irrigation system. And may be aware that with such systems, we can make huge economies in terms of water, irrigation water quantity. So I think this should address this issue. And hopefully, I know we are all aware that in Africa and in several regions in Africa, the groundwater can be limited. And by using such and promoting such drip systems, we help in a way prevent these issues.
Okay. Let me say that the depletion of aquifer can occur in any place if you don't know how big is the aquifer. If you drill a borehole and you don't know what is underground, you are like blind. So you may have the problem within months or years or seasonally to lack water. Obviously, if you are in position to detect the exact volume of the water and also the water that are in the area, then you can overcome this problem by drilling exactly where there is enough volume. So in our case, we can detect exactly the 3D dimension of the aquifer, and know that in case tomorrow that aquifer gets dry, okay, then we can have immediately another point, another aquifer in the vicinity to be harvested. And then in that case, a new borehole should be done. But at least your investment that you have on the ground is not lost, and you can continue to produce clean water by harvesting the aquifer number 2, number 3, number 4.
Thank you. And Laura?
Yeah, I was just going to say, really on the same page, if we have a borehole, we know what the capacity is, we get the report ahead of time, and then we design the system based on that. So to avoid any issues with depleting the aquifer. So.
Thank you very much. Well, I think we're gonna close it here. We are already way over the scheduled time, and I'm sorry about this, but then again, judging by the number of people who are still with us by now, I think it shows that this topic was really, really interesting. I would like to thank our panelists once again today for sharing about their experience and all the great work they are doing on the ground. Thank you so much. And of course, thank everybody who has been listening and taking some time off from the day-to-day duties. I hope this was a useful session for you. And of course, we will share the different presentations, the slides. And as I said, we will share all the questions that we were not able to address today with our speakers so that they can follow up with you and address all these important questions to you. Thank you very much to everybody, and we look forward to welcoming you again at one of our next events. Thank you and have a great day.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Have a nice day.
Thanks, everyone.